Hey everybody, this is Dave Tribbett here with another interview of a V3 Connect Perks member. And today I'm here with Alex Poitras, managing partner of Reveal. Super excited about the things we're going to talk about today. And if Alex would like to actually talk a little bit about maybe how we first got introduced, and then we'll talk a little bit about the work that they do. So.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dave. I remember when we first made contact. You were actually introduced to me by a mutual friend who I had met through some of my work in this volunteer work in the city of Medford, and had originally introduced you because of some big ideas and vision that I had from my position both at Reveal and kind of a vision for the city of making the community a more business friendly climate. So we got together over lunch, I believe, and uh, ever since then it's been an ongoing conversation about how we can improve the business community here in Southern Oregon.
So it's been a pleasure kind of getting to know, and actually at the truest sense of the word, I've, from what I've come to know about you being an entrepreneur and having several different businesses, and now the great work that you're doing for the companies you work with through Reveal, which is a full agency. And if you'd like to talk a little bit about maybe your team and the scope of work that you guys are able to do, and I think that'd be very helpful to individuals.
Sure. Our core at Reveal is really focused on brand strategy and crafting that brand message to align with what your customers and consumers are looking for. We like to talk about some statistics that were pre-COVID. I'll be interested to see what Nielsen and some of the other information sources come out with here in the next few weeks as new data starts to surface. But I mean, we were talking about before COVID-19, how the average American consumer is exposed to over 100,000 words per day, 4,000 ads per day, 34 gigs of data. That's a lot of information to consume and to process. And a lot of the challenge that brands have is reaching their consumers. And so our first approach when we start working with a brand is to understand where the disconnect is, because there's a built-in customer base for every brand that exists, right? They wouldn't exist unless they had already proven the concept and proven that they had a customer base to buy their product or service. So the real challenge and question that we're helping brands to answer is, how do they stand out in that 34 gigs of data people are consuming every day, or 4,000 ads? How do they stand out as the one ad that people see that actually resonates and causes that person to say, I want to spend my money here, or I want to work with this brand? And so we do a lot of digging into the ethos and core of what makes brands and businesses what they are.
As far as the strategy goes, I wonder if you could actually dig into that a little bit more, because you guys are so phenomenal with what you do with the strategy, even in the very beginning and kind of working through those processes with your clients. I think that would be helpful if you wanted to dig into that a little bit more.
The word I would use is dimension when it comes to the quality, if you will, of our strategy, because each of our partners, there are three primary partners at Reveal, and each of us brings a completely different set of dimensions. From the business needs and business goals standpoint, I actually have a very different approach than I think a lot of people in the marketing industry bring to it. And I'm an avid fan and, I guess, connoisseur of game theory. Uh, I love studying game theory. I love practicing game theory and playing games, mind games, not so much board games. Um, and I also love the study of anthropology and what causes people to act a certain way, or make certain decisions as a culture or as a society. It's one of my reasons for being on city council here, is that I love to be a part of creating things that are better for humanity and for a civilization. So there's a whole different perspective and dynamic that comes into that. And also from the entrepreneurship side, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 12 years old, started my own lawn care business, and lots of exposure and experience working in the business side of things and blending that game theory, anthropology, and marketing best practices, if you will. There are a whole lot more pieces that go into being visible and being found and resonating with your customer base than just showing up in the first search result. And those are often kind of shadows and smoke and mirrors that are representative of other things that you should be doing as a brand. And so our approach to helping brands get clear on what they need to be doing is to take a step back and figure out where their customers are actually looking for their service, what their customers actually need and want, and to align their brand to reflect those customers and then to get them in front of their customers. Sometimes that means strong search engine optimization as the primary expense. Sometimes that means very little focus on search engine optimization and more focus on just being present in the marketplace. There's a different approach and a different kind of pain point for every brand. And we really specialize in helping to identify what those pain points are and to address them.
Phenomenal. It brings to mind like a lot of conversations because one of the primary things I do, of course, with business consulting is talking to a lot of the businesses. They're really trying to find their way, and it's almost like they need to pivot and change because there's so much uncertainty with COVID. And I'm imagining that you're probably working with companies and currently that you're working through some of those ways for those companies to pivot in this uncertain market, and then also whether or not they should advertise or how they should advertise, right?
Yeah, that's a very common question. Should we continue advertising? Our customers aren't spending money right now. No, they're not. That's true. Not necessarily on your service. I like to take a look at the beauty industry specifically for the month of April. In April, consumer grade hair dye sales went up 325%. Nail polish sales. Yeah. How many colors can you dye your hair in a given time period, Dave?
Only light brown. That's the only one I go with, but I've seen some crazy colors.
Right. Nail polish sales were up over 200%.
Wow.
And so you look at the beauty salons and the beauticians of the world and you have to wonder like what's going to come of them. That is a very clear indicator of a market that's eroding at breakneck speeds. And there's a lot of work to be done by businesses coming online to re-educate their customer base and to remind them of the value of the services that they're providing. And you have two choices. You can wait until cash flow starts and the consumers start spending money again in more earnest, or you can continue being there, holding their hands throughout this process, reassuring them that you're okay and that you're going to be able to continue to offer service when they get back. I think a great anecdotal example to this is where I get my hair done. My own salon has reached out to me multiple times since COVID-19 started, asking me to buy a gift certificate. And I'll be completely frank, I haven't bought one because I don't know if they're going to be there.
Yeah.
And they haven't done a lot in the way of outreach besides buy a gift certificate for when we come back online. And there's that disconnect between where the brands are at and where the consumers are. So the reality is that brands that stop advertising for 2020 are going to have at least an 11% decline in revenue next year.
Wow.
Advertising campaigns take time to respool. They take time to relearn and to regain traction. Brand exposure takes at minimum 2 weeks to really gain traction in a branding campaign. So should you continue to advertise? Would you like to stay in business? If so, yeah, you need to continue advertising. Maybe not on the same budget, maybe not in the same channels. And I say this with about 98% relevance to anybody listening here, almost definitely not with the same message.
Yeah. And I think, and that's a great point. And I think it's another piece that I'd like to highlight is that where you're marketing may be on a bid-based system, and if your competitors aren't doing anything, you guys could do some amazing stuff working with somebody like Reveal, and if that's part of your campaign, right? Or am I totally wrong there? Because a lot of these systems are 100%. Bid-based, right?
Yep.
So how can they utilize some of those strategies as they pivot or shift a little bit in what they're actually getting in the message or getting out there?
Well, you definitely have to be mindful of your customers and what they're looking for. I mean, in our current economic climate, we're approaching 1/4 of the workforce being unemployed. That is gut wrenching. We're anticipating, or at least JP Morgan's analysts are anticipating our GDP in this quarter being 40% lower than what it has been. That is the biggest, sharpest decline in GDP in US history. There is a graveyard of consumer spending and of brands already starting to form in staggering fashion. So my point in bringing that up is not to be a wet blanket, but to point out, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy, right, where your highest level of emotional and mental needs are being met at the very tip point, but the ground level is your basic needs like food and shelter. You got a pretty solid 1/4 of our country right now that doesn't really care about brand loyalty. They don't really care how environmentally responsible, socially responsible you are. They just want to know how you can help them meet their basic needs. I need food, I need shelter. And they're not necessarily looking to spend the fewest dollars possible to get it. They're looking for the most value. So before you start going out and advertising the same message that you were advertising in February, think about what they're actually looking for and what they need, and how you can pivot your products, your services, or your offerings to add more value and to be relevant to what people are looking for right now. Keep that ground level of the Maslow hierarchy in mind. And I don't care if you're Coach and Gucci or if you're a generic no-name brand that imports your stuff from China. And I'm not projecting or condemning either of those business models. They're both very valid and both very effective. It doesn't matter though. You've got to be thinking about value and what your consumers need right now.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. So it's not, and what I'm getting from you is that it's not just that it's maybe a good value out there for marketing potentially, but really knowing your customer, and that's great advice. I am curious, in your business or your customers' businesses, do you think it's a good time to evaluate their value proposition or a universal selling proposition in a time like with being impacted with COVID now?
Yes, most definitely. And I touched on this a minute ago, but I mean, I'm going to speak to the B Corps of the world for a second and say that's very respectable. And I appreciate what you are doing from, building your business and operating it as a sustainable type business where you're taking good care of your staff, you're being very environmentally responsible, and you're giving a percentage of your profits to charity. And people are not buying your products just because of that at this point, right? Go into any grocery store, into any big box retailer, and store shelves are decimated regardless of what the brands are on the shelves. So you need to be focusing on how this meets a need. Take Apple computers, for example. They just launched a completely new model of computers just a couple of weeks ago. And they focused most of their messaging in that launch around content creation, podcasts, webinars, video editing. Why do you think that might be? Most of the people who are using computers right now from a business case standpoint are trying to produce content. They're trying to produce videos, webinars, podcasts. And so they're aligning their message to resonate with the most relevant thing on people's minds right now. And you need to do the same thing regardless of what you're selling. Things aren't going back to normal. It's a myth. It's a lie. Things are going to become normal and habits are going to stick. Expectations are going to be higher than ever. They're not going back. So stop looking back. We're business leaders. We're visionaries. Look to the future. How are things changing and what's going to become the new normal and the new permanent? And start pivoting your brand that way, because those that do will have a very good fighting chance. And those that don't, I assure you, will die.
I absolutely agree, but that's a pretty strong statement, but it's just the truth that people need to realize that. I don't know if you'd like to share anything about being part of V3 Connect and maybe what that means to you guys.
Sure. I think one of it's been a process and a struggle for us from the very inception for Avail to figure out where do our primary customers circulate? Where do they go to work? Where do they have conversations and socialize? And we've tested a variety of different networks and platforms to make our brand known. And we found that nothing really works better from a sales standpoint than having that personal experience reference to speak to the type of work that we do. It can be a little bit of a paradigm shift for brands coming in to wrap their heads around the fact that we don't charge hourly. We don't charge really based on deliverables in the conventional sense. We do use a method that's becoming more popular in industry called value pricing, and we approach it from the standpoint of what is it that you're trying to accomplish, what is the value of that to your brand. We have to make sure that we're covering our costs, which we do most of the time. Sometimes we lose money, and that's okay. And it's a really unusual business model for people to wrap their minds around. And I think that one of the values that we found through V3 Connect is that personal advocacy that you bring to the members by doing some of the vetting on the front end to shorten our sales process, and also doing some more of that explanation and I guess personal referral with these brands, helping them to understand why it is that our price model and our approach stands apart and helps businesses in a unique way. And so I think that's been tremendous. And we want to work with local businesses. We want to help businesses in our community. We did not really do a lot of work with local clients up until beginning of 2019. We were focused mostly outside of our community because there was this perception that that's where the money is. And I think that in the past year, we've definitely been proven wrong about that. And this has definitely given us a much more interactive kind of, well, before COVID-19, face-to-face, interpersonal experience, and an opportunity to brush shoulders with a lot more of the business leadership in our community. And so I think it's been very strong in that way.
Great. I appreciate you sharing that. So that's a wrap.
All right.
Per se.